Hi, this video is a reading vlog of me reading A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara. If you've never heard of this book, my first question is, you probably live a happy and painless life, because after reading this book, I feel like I was so impacted. I had so many takeaways from it, which you'll see throughout the course of this video. But I did just want to give a little introduction and background to this story in case you hadn't heard of it before, or if this is just something that you've seen but you don't really know what it's about, just so maybe I could pique your interest a little bit. Basically, A Little Life is a coming-of-age story that follows four friends in a friend group: Jude, Willem, Malcolm, and JB, and it follows them throughout their trials and tribulations throughout life as they grow older, and how their relationships with each other and people change as a result of time passing and people maturing. So when I first heard of this book, I wasn't sure what to expect or if it was going to be something that I enjoyed, but I think if you're clicking on this video, if I can recommend one thing to you, it would be to really read this book. I still think about it after finishing it. I feel like it has really good outlooks on life and just quotes about growing older and just relationships with people and really fostering and nurturing those relationships and why that's important. And I really think that so much from this book really changed my way of thinking without me even realizing that while I was reading it or while I was integrating my lessons from it at the time. So I really recommend reading this book. Just a fair warning though, there are so many trigger warnings in this book. Please look them up before you start it. There is probably something under the sun for anyone that is a sensitive topic. So just keep that in mind. It is also an extremely graphic and detailed novel about certain scenes that are part of the trigger warning. So if that can, be mentally taxing for you, or you're not really equipped to read stuff like that, maybe shy away from this one. That being said, I don't typically read things like that. However, I still really enjoyed the book. Coming from one sensitive person to another, I do have a tendency to be extremely sensitive and very emotional. This definitely will get to you, so just keep that in mind. But with that being said, you'll see my thoughts as we go throughout this vlog. But with that being said, let's go ahead and start this spoiler-filled reading vlog. Okay, so little update. I'm about 100 pages into A Little Life, and I just wanted to give my thoughts so far in reading it. I actually am very pleasantly surprised by how much I'm liking this book so far. I feel like when I was forced to read classics in high school, it was not books that I particularly enjoyed reading, and I didn't like their writing style, and I felt it was difficult to either connect with or resonate with some of the books that they were kind of having us read. I know there's a reason that they make us read Catcher in the Rye, but I definitely didn't like Grapes of Wrath. I read Angela's Ashes, stuff like that. It was just not books that I really enjoyed reading at all and didn't find interesting. So I was a little bit apprehensive going into a type of book like this, because it is, like, from what I've seen, being regarded as going to become a classic or of that nature. So I wasn't sure exactly what to expect. And a lot of times with classics, like, the writing style or the prose with which the author writes doesn't really resonate with me a lot. But so far, I'm actually really happy with this book. Like I said, I'm about 100 pages in, and I think I'm pleasantly surprised because, I'm a through and through romance reader, romantasy reader, really. That's my cup of tea. That's what I enjoy. And when I read books that aren't of that nature, I just don't tend to like them. But this, for some reason, like, you would think that I would find it to be boring, but I don't. I finished the part one. I'm on the Postman section, and so far I'm really liking it. I think it's because the way that the author's writing style is, it seems like you're kind of like a fly on the wall, observing the situation as it is, but more so like you're kind of in each of the characters' minds, which I really like. I feel like when you're reading Willem's chapter, the way that it's written, it's like you think just like he does, and you like hate X, Y, and Z because of like what he does. Like, you hate, or not hate, but you're like so angry with Jude because of whatever. But then you read JB's chapter, and then you're like, oh, Malcolm is such a like stuff like that. I feel like the author's done a really good job about. And the other thing is, I believe it's Jack Edwards mentioned this, I really briefly when I heard him talking about this book, but there is like zero mention of time in this book, like in terms of placement, like relevancy of when this book is taking place, what time period, when it's applicable to. And I really, really like that. There's no mention of like technology or this or that or whatever. You can and I really like that, because I think with a lot of the classics, it just seems so outdated. You know, the themes obviously resonate for a reason and they're classics for a reason, and be that as it may, I feel like a lot of times when the books are that old, it just seems really outdated. But with this, there's no mention of time and like no mention of these smartphones or whatever, but I feel like it can be, and it is taking place in this like current time period. The themes and like the way that people talk and the hustle and the struggle that's kind of mentioned for these characters throughout the books is like super relevant, and I can see it being relevant in a lot of different time periods, which I really like. So I'm really happy with it so far. I would have to say, I think that the character I am liking the most right now is probably none of them. Actually, they all kind of piss me off in certain ways. I want to say Willem, because I feel like he's the most practical and maybe the most like overall relatable, but I think like the way that he handles the situations with the Jews really piss me off. Like I cannot stand people like that and characters like that. They like get under my skin and irk me so badly. I like that. I think that you can tell like what each of their distinct personalities are, like what they each do and what they bring to the table versus how they're annoying and stuff like that. I think she's doing a really good job about developing these characters and putting them into like real people and being able to like really feel like you're in that group or like in the mindset of those characters in this book, which I think she's doing a really good job of. So part 2 is about 140 pages. So I will check in as I progress through, maybe at part 3 or when I have a thought. But yeah, so far pleasantly surprised. I know that this book is probably gonna ruin my life mentally. That's like what I've seen. Luckily, I would say with the first part, I'm not feeling that so far, but you know, lots can happen in 150 pages. So just like a little progress update. I still am really liking the book. I am reading it fairly slowly, but I'm also trying to absorb what the book is saying because I feel like there are a lot of quotes in here that I really like. I also really like the use of the parentheses that she uses. It's like they're kind of intrusive thoughts of whatever character that is talking at the time or whoever's POV you're viewing at the time, which I also really like. I think that just makes it feel less like I'm just reading like this gigantic novel and that I'm actually in the inner thoughts of the characters in this, which I really like. So I'm very much enjoying the parentheses usage in the book as well. So it's a little progress update. I think there's like 200 something pages in the second part, so I'm gonna try and finish this up and then give my next update. So I am coming to you in a different location. And that different location is in fact my bathroom, but I feel like this was the nicest lighting. But anyways, I wanted to give a little bit of update on A Little Life. So I finished chapter 2 and I also did start, or not chapter 2, like part 2. I finished it and then I also did start a little bit of chapter 3. So I'm currently on page 252 and I just wanted to give my thoughts on part 2 in general. So I would say out of everything I've read so far, I definitely enjoyed part 2 the most. I think it was really nice to start getting glimpses of Jude's past and his upbringing. I feel like he is the most mysterious out of all of them just because he's very secretive about his past. It's very obvious that, you know, he has a lot of trauma and a lot of things that have happened to him, and you can kind of piece together at this point kind of what the main things were, but it's not explicitly said, which I think normally would frustrate me, but I actually don't mind it too much in this book, and I don't know why. I think it's because the way that this book is written reminds me a lot of getting to know somebody as a friend. And when I get to know somebody as my friend, it takes a while to break down those walls and those barriers and get to a lot of the crazy things that have happened to people and just like the deeper things that have happened to people. And I feel like that's how I feel about getting to know the characters in this book. So I really like that. I will say I was so filled with a feeling of warmth and happiness for Jude when he was getting adopted, but then I also find him really frustrating and kind of hard to understand because I'm like, why are you so closed off a lot of it is self-sabotage, and it's weird to think about because he himself knows that it's self-sabotage, but for whatever reason he just can't stop doing it to himself anyways, which I think is frustrating, but a very human emotion and a very human character. So there's that as well. I will say, I think I did an update on this, but I still, for whatever reason, can't figure out who that random POV was. I think it was chapter 2, part 2. Like, I don't understand who that was. I originally thought it was, like, Harold or whoever, but I'm like, who the hell is Liesel? Because Harold's wife's name is Julia. So I'm like, who in the F is this second person? So I don't know who that is. I don't know if I'm just dumb. Yeah, that's my little update on part 2. I'm gonna go through part 3. Part 3 is also a hefty one. I will give an update once I finish part 3, or if I have anything else to say, but okay, hello. I have made some progress, so I just wanted to give another update. So I finished part 3, which was titled Vanities, which is about 320 pages left, and now I'm on the part 4, the axiom of equality. So I wanted to give just a little bit of my thoughts on the Vanities chapter and how I'm feeling about this book so far. I think at first the Vanities chapter was a little bit slower. I think Lispinard Street was really good. I really enjoyed that chapter, but I feel like the beginning of this part was a little bit slower, so I was having a little bit of a harder time getting into it, and then also just making my way through it in general. But this last chapter of JB's was really sad, really impactful, really sad, and it was tough. And I think it's really interesting to get different perspectives of their friend group dynamic. I think it really shows how biased a narrator can be, because when you hear things from Willem's perspective or Jude's perspective, I'm thinking that JB's an ass. And he is. He's not really a good person in my opinion. But then when I read the chapters in JB's point of view, where he clearly has this drug problem that he doesn't want to face, but a lot of it comes from his abandonment issues, and even those issues are narcissistic in and of itself. And he admits that as well. But the last chapter was really, really sad. It really was touching to me that JB calls Jude to help him. I can only imagine how really frustrating it is to have a friend like Jude who won't ever open up. But I think it's really touching, but also heart-wrenching to see that even if he doesn't open up, Jude is the one that shows up, really. But in this chapter, I think it's also really evident that all of them came. And as much as Jude and Willem want to say that the friendship isn't the same, they still show up when one of them needs it. And I think that's very powerful, but yet really, really sad. There was one section that I really, really liked that talked about friendship that I actually sent to my best friend because I really, really liked it. And I really resonated with it, and it's probably one of my favorite lines that I've read so far, and I sent it to her and I told her that it reminded me of her, but I don't know, it just seemed so relevant. But I'm just gonna read the line. Lately, he had been wondering if codependence was such a bad thing. He took pleasure in his friendships, and it didn't hurt anyone, so who cared if it was codependent or not? And anyway, how was a friendship any more codependent than a relationship? Why was it admirable when you were 27, but creepy when you were 37? Why wasn't friendship as good as a relationship? Why wasn't it even better? It was two people who remained together, day after day, bound not by sex or by physical attraction or money or children or property, but only by the shared agreement to keep going, the mutual dedication to a union that could never be codified. Friendship was witnessing another's slow drip of miseries and long bouts of boredom and occasional triumphs. It was feeling honored by the privilege of getting to be present for another person's most dismal moments and knowing that you could be dismal around him in return. I think like that about my best friend. I feel like honored that she chooses to allow me into those like deep moments, and those crucial moments that not everyone gets to see. Yeah, I just really liked that chapter, or that line, that paragraph. It's probably my favorite one that I've read so far in the book. But now we are slowly but surely chugging our way into part 4. This is 140, yeah, 160, excuse me, 160 pages in this part. And then from what I've heard that part 5, titled The Happy Years, is where this book like wrecks you. So I'm not really sure how this is gonna go, but I'm gonna read the axiom of equality and keep you guys posted and give you my opinions as I move on. Okay, so I wanted to give a little bit of an update. So this is a tough book to read. I wasn't really feeling that way, I would say, for the first half of the book, but right around the halfway part it really picks up, and it is really, really sad. It's really, really sad. So I just wanted to document on here. I just really like the way she weaves things into her writing. So it's not explicitly stated. It is, but it's in a way where you just kind of find out as you go through the motions. And I really, really like that. I haven't read many books like that. And I think I don't know if you could hear the thunder, but I really like how she's doing that. I have finished part 3, which is the axiom of equality. I think, as you can tell from my state, I'm unwell. I think overall this is probably my favorite part so far, just because we got a lot of history and background on what it is that happened with Jude in his past, and it just was absolutely heart-wrenching. There was like so much that happened that this was like a chapter full of background reveals, and they were all sad. Like, right when I thought it was gonna be okay, something even worse happened. Like, I just can't really picture, or not picture, I just can't really comprehend or fathom that level of trauma that a human being can have. And it just seems to be happening like over and over and over and over, just to the same person, which is just like horrible. So sad, so heart-wrenching. But I have heard that this next part, the happy years, is the hardest part to read. So I'm gonna start that now, and I think at this point I'm about like 70% of the way through the book, so I'm gonna try and see what progress I can make, because now I feel like I'm really invested in the characters, or at least Jude, Willem, Harold, Andy, all those people, and so I just kind of want to see what happens. And I also want to know why this is a chapter that everyone talks about, so I'm a little bit nervous, but I'm gonna read through it, see what happens, and then give you guys posted. Well, I know I said that I was gonna come back with an update after Happy Years, but I just sat and I finished the whole book, and I'm really unwell. I had some time to adjust, or rather collect my thoughts and think about what I really liked and disliked about this book. And I will say, overall, I settled on a 4 out of 5 stars for this book. I liked this a lot more than I thought, but I hesitate with using the word like, because I think that this book is very, very heavy, and I'm somebody that doesn't get very impacted by heavy topics in books much. I feel like if I'm watching something and I visually am seeing the difficult scenario play out, then that will affect me a lot. But this book was really, really hard. At times I felt like this is almost too hard, in the sense of every time that we really got to what was Jude's history and why was he being so secretive, and when you really delved into the depths of his story, I just could not even fathom. Like, it just kept getting worse and worse, to the point where I was like, it was heartbreaking in a sense that it did really make me feel something, but I'm like, this is absolute, like, the worst thing that you could think of, and it's worse than that, so it was very hard in that sense to get through, but it was really good. I will say, I for some reason, I don't know if I'm naive for saying this, but I really did not see the relationship coming between Willem and Jude. I really just thought that they were the best of friends. And I remember, I think I read a quote to the camera a little bit earlier on how I really liked a paragraph about like, why does a codependent relationship or an extremely close relationship have to be romantic? And that's like probably the one quote that stuck with me throughout the majority of this book. I really liked that, and I sent that to my best friend, and I feel like them kind of getting together negates that quote a little bit. However, I will say that you could just tell how much Willem loved Jude, and I actually think that Willem loved Jude more than Jude loved Willem. Do I think that Jude loved Willem? Absolutely. I think to the core of their beings, the two of them really loved each other, and I didn't really expect that coming out of this book, and I didn't expect to like that either. I feel like this was the first time I've read something really powerful in the sense that these are two human beings that were just destined to love each other. That's honestly how I feel about those two characters, and that was really moving in that way. But I do think that Willem loved Jude more, and as much as I hate that for Willem, because I did really end up liking his character in the end, I'm really glad that that happened for Jude's sake. At the end of the day, I think that this was a through and through love story about a friendship at the forefront, and that I really loved. I was so hurt, of course, by the last like page of Happy Years. I did low-key see that coming, in the sense that I did think that that was going to happen when I realized who Harold was writing to, and I would really recommend it if you're looking for an impactful story on life. This story is really just a story about a life, and something else that I found really impactful in this story is that how Jude views himself as basically disposable, irrelevant, unimportant, and you see that Jude literally thinks of himself as a lesser being, like equivalent to trash basically. But you see how many people that Jude impacts as a human being, and I think that says a lot about a person as a human, that this person has impacted this many people. And he has so many people in his life that love him more than he ever thought, and I just wish that he would recognize that for himself. I would say I really did enjoy the writing style of this, even though it was slow at times and over descriptive in my opinion at times. Did enjoy it. The pacing was good, and I feel as though the way that she wrote each part was very authentic to what the chapter was titled, in the sense of, for example, for the axiom of equality, it did feel very matriculated, and I think it just felt not as emotional and very to the fact, versus the Happy Years. That one felt, like I said, like I was reading that through a rose-colored lens. The way that she had written that chapter just made it feel like I was like looking back in someone's memory, and that's what I would expect from a title like that. I'm really happy that I read this. I feel like this is not a book that I would have normally read or normally picked up, but it definitely is one that I am glad to say I have read, and think that anyone that's in their adult life should read this and be introspective on their relationships, because it definitely made me really think about a lot of the relationships that I have in life. That's my thoughts on A Little Life. This book definitely took me a long time to read because of the heavy topics, and it also is really just, it is a thick book, so it took me a while to read, but that is my like reading vlog on it. Let me know if you guys have read this, what your thoughts are down below, and thanks so much for watching.